fight fam. Boxing is called the sweet science for a reason. Every slip, every counter, every trap, it's all hidden in the details. At Boxing Gems, we break down those details frame by frame so fans can see the art behind the fight. If you enjoy our YouTube film studies and want to go deeper down the rabbit hole, Patreon is the place. It helps us keep producing high quality breakdowns without worrying about algorithms, and it gives you exclusive access to the content that can't make it on the YouTube. Get extended live stream breakdowns with more detail and analysis. Ask your own questions in the 24/7 chats, decide what fights or fighters we cover, and get personalized private analysis. Gain access to our thriving betting community as well as Boxing Gems weekly picks and much more. Your support means we can keep studying the sport we love and showing why boxing is the most beautiful science. Join the Boxing Gems community on Patreon and let's keep breaking down the fight game together. This is Ryan, professional boxing analyst and founder of Boxing Gems Film Study. Film don't lie. Both the jab catch and jab parry are very useful tactics. A parry is defined as warding off an attack. Catching a jab literally means catching a jab with an open glove. So a jab parry is typically warding off an attack, typically with the aligned hand. The jab parry or catch is effective defensively and may afford you countering opportunities as your attacking opponent's guard remains open for a split second longer after the punch is warded off and out of position to bring the shield back for return fire. However, reaching the parry will cause some issues against a moderately savvy fighter. The parry is a reactionary defensive maneuver. Whatever guard you were using to protect your chin is now compromised due to you taking away that defensive shield and reacting to your opponent's jab. If the opponent were to establish the jab and get you used to catching or parrying the jab, they may afford themselves clear openings for power punches by feinting their own jab or simply surprise you with lead power on the same rhythm or timing of the established jab. The more common and typical power punch you'll have to contend with is the left hook. But the rear hand is also a danger as you are left with a single shield to defend. Reaching to parry the jab is one of the most common mistakes in all of boxing at every level. This common mistake easily rivals single mid-range jabs in pro boxing as it's the main catalyst for hook knockouts, but can also be seen multiple times in virtually every fight. The hand you use to punch is also the hand you use to defend the side you're punching from. When a punch is thrown, the protection is the threat of the punch. There are no two-hand punches in boxing as that is against the rules of the sport, so dropping your offhand or keeping your offhand low while you're throwing the other hand is clearly an issue. Fundamentally, you aren't dropping hands even with combinations. Dropping or keeping the offhand low means it is simply doing nothing as opposed to defending, which opens up a wider variety of counter punches. Not only is your punch hand or threat leaving openings, but now your offhand is leaving openings. To make matters worse, as you punch, your balance is transitioning towards your offhand side, which multiplies the potential impact of a counter coming opposite.
In dem Moment zieht nochmal nach. Da. Pushes the hand down.
Beautiful. Has landed a few good punches, but they haven't moved. There he goes. Champion hit him over.
Like he's starting to clear his head a little bit.
There he goes.
Feet crossed. Oh!
And they
Hey, that's it. That's it. It's scored. But ball power and not left. Put him down. His work cut out when Mike Tyson. Oh, the right hand.
Jefferson. Right there, yeah, right in between. Usually when your hands are down, we're used to.
Big left hook. What a shot from Lewis.
Has climbed up from the most awful poverty to being a champion of the world and cementing it with that sort of display.
absolutely great performance.
Good left hand. And big left hand there. Oh! He was not. It is over. And here comes that big shot. Oh, too tall. He's shifting up.
Based on a boxer's foot positioning in a typical boxing stance, the fighter has an established direction of offense or line of attack where acquiring targets and attacking going forward is most optimal. They aren't set for anything outside that line of attack until they adjust their foot positioning. They may have the ability to punch in a completely different direction, but it's near impossible for that punch to be as meaningful as a punch within the line of attack. They can generate power moving on that line with proper balance and weight distribution. A punch off the line of attack is also very likely to throw the fighter off of their balanced stance, which would make them extremely vulnerable to counterpunches. In this case, the least optimal way for the opponent to evade is staying on that line of attack, yet fighters commonly make the mistake of retreating in a straight line. Here, we define backing out in straight lines as more than one full maneuver backwards, but that can be shortened to just one maneuver depending on how quick the attacker's penetration step is or the range a defender is stepping back from. If the step back is from mid-range to inside, it's now dangerous to step back in a straight line, period. The other major issue is that space isn't infinite in a boxing ring, it's a square. Any continual straight line has to lead to the ropes or the corner, making it difficult to escape or defend effectively, possibly losing the perception of control of the fight. Maintaining your boxing stance is of the utmost importance. Whether attacking or defending, for proper mechanics to ensue, you need a proper base, which means a proper boxing stance. Any break from that base and you limit power, limit offensive and defensive options, and compromise balance. The concept should be common sense in the system of boxing. If your base is broken, you are less able and more vulnerable. The less time your base is broken, the better off you are as a fighter. Even moving your feet in a simple half step means momentarily breaking your base in a split second that one foot is off the ground. That's why good trainers preach small steps to keep that base break at a minimum. So more dynamic or wider footwork maneuvers like shuffling, L steps, pendulum steps, rhythm stepping, and crossing your feet vary in even more risk. Shifting from stance to stance is the least risky way to cross your feet, whether orthodox to southpaw or vice versa. These differ depending on range, but the three main risks the mechanics of shifting forward or backward typically have are: 1. Either foot comes off the ground in a longer step, passing the other foot, therefore breaking your base for a relatively longer period of time. 2. Your shoulders inevitably become square or perpendicular to your opponent momentarily during the shift, exposing your center line. 3. Your position virtually stays the same until near completion of the step. front foot to go forward, back foot to go backward are fundamentals in boxing. The logic is that you can actually change your position significantly by extending your base in the direction you want to go with the foot that's already towards that direction, as opposed to collapsing your base with the opposite foot. A shift collapses your base first, then extends it, making the maneuver far slower than fundamental footwork forward or backward. To minimize these risks of shifting forward, well-schooled fighters protect the shift with offense. A backhand cross usually coincides with the back foot coming forward, then another punch from the same side occupies the opponent's guard and keeps the opponent's hands at home. Cross-walking and cross-stepping isn't shifting into the opposite stance. Cross-walking is simply various ways of breaking your base by crossing your feet forward or backwards into something that isn't a proper boxing stance, akin to walking down the street or stepping the wrong foot first to go left or right. So along with all the risks of shifting, crosswalking has the added risk of not even ending up in a stance, forcing you to reset into a proper stance with one or more extra steps. A rear hand in a bladed stance is typically the hand with the most power. In the closed stance, aka orthodox versus orthodox or southpaw versus southpaw, the lead hand has alignment with and typically defends the opponent's rear hand. Your rear hand is typically defending the opponent's lead hand. Unless you're fighting with both hands low, your rear hand is typically up for defense no matter what guard you choose. So even if you fight with the lead hand low in the closed stance, to block the rear hand, you will put the lead shield up and be in a high guard. Both shields up, large target areas covered, chin tucked. In the Mayweather defense, or what most call the Philly shell, the lead shoulder deals with rear hands as you keep your lead hand in the sling and turn the shoulder to roll the punch. On the flip side, the open stance, aka southpaw versus orthodox, is the mirrored image. Your lead hands align, your rear hands align. Typically, the lead hands block each other, and so naturally, rear hands block each other, right? Well, not exactly. Remember, in the closed stance, when you blocked your opponent's rear hand, your lead hand went up, matching your rear hand that was already up, making a high guard. Both shields up, larger target area covered, chin tucked in between. Since fighters in the open stance don't naturally block rear hands with their lead hand, they end up relying on that single high shield to block rear hands. One shield up, smaller target area covered, chin exposed on one side. Trying to absorb the impact of a rear hand on gloves has always been an issue within itself, especially with the single glove and a single high shield. The force of the opponent's strongest punch, plus the momentum from the distances traveled, can easily break through the single shield. Even worse is the miscalculation of the rear hand punch's trajectory. Miscalculating the trajectory means thinking you have an adequate defense for a rear hand that you see coming, which then subtly lands flush, brutally surprising you around your guard. exacerbating the issue with single high shields in the open stance. Even if you manage to successfully block the rear hand, due to the mechanics of the block, which typically square the shoulders to some degree, it's now incredibly difficult to defend the lead hand if it's thrown in relatively quick combination. The single high shield plays a large part in why we see cross swivel jab and cross hook combinations working repeatedly in the open stance fights at every level. Out of all the film studies on boxing gyms, the most frequently occurring mistake that fighters make has been the single mid-range jab. The single mid-range jab is exactly what it sounds like, throwing a jab at mid-range without following up with another strike or a defensive maneuver from equal positioning. Every movement in boxing has a counter movement. However, the most commonly thrown and frequently countered punch in boxing is the jab. Relatively the weakest punch, fighters will even choose to eat the jab just to counter it with the power punch, typically without much consequence, giving it significantly more risk. Aside from that, the jab isn't inherently more risky than any other punch. In fact, a properly thrown jab can chiefly be used defensively, for example, as a means to control distance and fight pace. Throwing the jab improperly, in this case a single jab from an incorrect range where every power punch in the opponent's arsenal is available, can't be seen as anything else but a mistake. When you're already mid-range, or a range you can punch your opponent without a step, without a follow-up shot for an opponent to manage, or a defensive maneuver that moves the head, is simply what we call taking a picture or admiring your work in the kill zone after throwing the weakest punch in the system of boxing. More egregious are fighters who add an unnecessary front step to the mistake of a single mid-range jab. You're already mid-range. If you could reach your opponent with the jab, there's no need to step to land that shot. Adding more mechanics to the risky jab just means more can and will go wrong. A footwork mechanic generally implies balance, which can now be compromised due to adding a step to a single jab that was already in range. Now weight distribution becomes more of an issue, as you would generally transfer more weight on a step than you would if you were stationary, a recipe for disaster. The most common occurrence of the single mid-range jab is when fighters close distance from outside to mid-range with the full step in and single jab. The initial forward half step with the front foot puts you at the edge of mid-range to land the jab. The subsequent rear foot coming forward keeps you mid-range if your opponent doesn't move backwards. In other words, you step to mid-range momentarily vulnerable, throwing the weakest punch in the system, then remain mid-range while your back foot sets. The same maneuver, victim after victim. Of course, the risk is amplified by the great number of lazy jabs that are thrown around pro boxing. The more egregious form of the full step in is what I call falling in. Falling in consists of jabbing, then continued forward momentum after the jab. Fighters typically use this maneuver to set up the rear hand power shot. It's typically a jab, forward shuffle, rear hand. Falling in has all the dangers of the other forms of single mid-range jabs, with the added bonus of the body weight's forward momentum making the counterpunch's impact increase. Not to mention the heightened risk that you'll be caught completely off balance or even airborne.